Have you ever walked into a room and known, without a word being spoken, that you had already been judged, not by your actions, not by your choices, but by the very skin you were born into? This isn't just a story about courtrooms and legal battles. This is about the quiet violence of assumptions and the fire of a woman who refused to be dismissed. Hey friend, I hope today's been kind to you. I hope you and your loved ones are safe, grounded, and surrounded by peace, because what I'm about to share, it's a storm, and not everyone survives it. Now take a breath and step with me inside a courthouse in Washington, D.C., on a morning thick with gray clouds and the kind of chill that gets into your bones. The air outside D.C. Superior Court was sharp, not just cold, but heavy, like the sky itself had settled low, pressing against the city with a weight no one could name. Inside, the rhythm was routine. Attorneys shuffled papers with bored precision. Defendants sat stiff and silent, their lives dangling between sighs and sentences. Security guards scanned the lobby like machines. No warmth, no welcome. And then Grace Whitmore walked in. Her heels clicked softly on polished tile, her posture upright, unbothered, her expression unreadable. She wasn't there to explain herself. She wasn't there to ask for permission to belong. She knew who she was, but what she also knew was that they didn't. The moment she stepped through those doors, conversation shifted, not stopped, just lowered, tilted, turned. She felt it in the way necks craned and eyes narrowed ever so slightly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was familiar, the same old whisper she'd heard her entire life. What's she doing here? Grace knew the script. She'd been handed it 1,000 times. She was supposed to smile, to apologize for taking up space, to explain, to shrink, but not today. Her navy blue skirt suit fit like armor, sleek, quiet, deliberate. Her braids were pulled back in a style that said, "Respect me," without begging. Everything about her presence was intentional. And still, it wasn't enough. Because in places like this, for women like her, it never really is. Near the front entrance, 2 uniformed officers leaned against the marble wall, sipping cheap coffee from paper cups. One of them, Officer Blake Vaughn, had the kind of face that wore a smirk like a birthmark. Square jaw, silvering crew cut, and a chest puffed just a little too far forward. When he saw her, he didn't see the senior White House advisor she was. He saw a Black woman walking into a courtroom. And in his mind, that only meant one thing. He nudged his partner with an elbow, chuckled under his breath, then stepped into her path. "You lost, sweetheart?" His voice was coated in syrup, lazy, casual, but beneath it was the sharpened edge of disrespect. He didn't ask out of concern. He asked to put her in her place. Grace didn't blink. She looked him straight in the eye, not confrontational, not frightened, just unwavering. Then she said, quiet, firm, and with every ounce of her dignity intact, "I know exactly where I am." No smile, no explanation, no performance, just truth. And for one brief flickering second, Officer Vaughn's smirk cracked. Something shifted behind his eyes, something he hadn't expected to feel. Doubt. He recovered quickly, of course. Men like him always do. "Let's hope you know where you're going," he muttered, stepping aside. But Grace didn't respond. She walked past him, unbothered, unshaken, unforgiving, because what Vaughn didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that today, he wasn't the one doing the watching. Today, the reckoning walked in on heels, and by the time it was over, he'd remember her name. Have you ever been in a room where you had to prove your worth before saying a single word? Southeast DC had its own rhythm, not the kind you hear in symphonies, but in sirens, in bass lines thumping through cracked windows, in footsteps that moved quickly and never lingered too long in one place. It was in this rhythm that Grace Whitmore was raised, and she learned early just how dangerous it could be to slow down. She knew what it meant to be watched. She'd felt it in the way police cruisers crawled past schoolyards, officers scanning faces like a checklist. She'd seen it in the way corner store owners hovered near the panic button when boys with dark skin and deeper laughter walked in. And she'd seen it in the eyes of mothers, arms crossed on porch railings, watching the street like it was enemy territory, praying their children wouldn't become the next name on a t-shirt. Grace understood all of it because she'd lived it. But even in that world of sharp corners and narrow chances, there was one place that held no judgment, one person who saw her not as a risk, not as a warning, but as possibility. Her father. She was 8 the day he took her to the National Mall. She'd seen pictures, sure, textbooks full of white domes and waving flags. But standing there, it was different. The Washington Monument pierced the sky, cutting through clouds like a silent sentinel. Tourists buzzed around them. Vendors roasted peanuts on carts that smelled like childhood and sunshine. Her father, a quiet man with strong hands and slow wisdom, knelt beside her, placed a steady palm on her back. "Look around, baby girl." And she did. She saw the Capitol, the White House in the distance, the long stretch of lawn where history had marched, knelt, wept. He pointed at the city, the marble buildings, the steps, the symbols. "One day," he said, voice deep and certain, "you're going to do something important here." Grace blinked. "Me?" He nodded, no hesitation. "Yes, you, right here in this city." At 8, she didn't understand the weight of those words, but she would, because years later, when childhood gave way to reality, that promise remained. It curled around her bones. It fueled the fire in her chest, and it whispered, even when the world tried to drown it out, "You belong here." Grace wasn't handed opportunities. She carved them out inch by inch, with grit beneath her fingernails and a spine that refused to fold. She studied harder than the rest, stayed longer, spoke less, and listened more. And when she earned her full ride to Howard University, it wasn't just a scholarship. It was a declaration. Howard wasn't just a college, it was a legacy. The kind of place where dreams weren't just born. They were trained to fight back. At Howard, she didn't just study public policy. She dissected it. She read laws not like poetry, but like strategy, looking for the cracks, the loopholes, the places where justice slipped through the cracks, like water through broken hands. She watched trials, took notes, and slowly she began to understand. Justice wasn't blind. It just looked the other way when it was convenient. Her fire didn't go unnoticed. After graduation, she landed a hard-earned internship with the Department of Justice. From there, she was a shadow in rooms where real decisions were made. Rooms where men in tailored suits discussed urban policy without ever setting foot in the neighborhoods they ruled over. She watched, listened, remembered, and when an offer came, senior advisor to the White House Office of Public Engagement, she didn't take it for prestige, she took it for her people. Because Grace didn't just want to be in the room, she wanted to make sure the people outside the room were never forgotten again. So when Officer Vaughn smirked at her that morning, when he looked through her like she was furniture, like she was in the wrong place, she didn't flinch. She'd already stood in rooms colder than that. She'd already outlasted stares sharper than that. And she wasn't there for validation. She was there for her father's promise, for the little girl who stood beneath a marble sky and was told, "Yes, you." And she was there for justice. Because in this country, justice wasn't something you were given. It was something you had to fight for. And Grace Whitmore, she was more than ready to fight. The courthouse didn't hum with justice. It pulsed with resignation. Grace Whitmore had been in spaces like this before. rooms that smelled of polished wood and institutional air freshener, where lives were weighed on tired eyes and stamped forms, where the walls whispered one thing over and over: some people matter more than others. She adjusted the strap on her satchel. Inside, neatly tabbed documents, phone records, surveillance logs, sworn statements, truth. But truth, she knew too well, didn't always win. She stepped through the heavy door of courtroom 4B. Her eyes went immediately to him, Julian, her cousin, her godson, her second-chance brother. He sat at the defense table, hands folded together, back straight like he'd been told to make himself small but not invisible. His jaw was tight, his eyes still. But Grace could see it, the subtle bounce of his knee beneath the table, the tension hiding behind every breath. He was holding on, but barely. 3 weeks ago, Julian Davis had been waiting for a ride. That's all. A college senior, honor roll, volunteered twice a week mentoring kids from his old high school, never missed class, never missed curfew. But that night, none of it mattered. He stood outside a closed convenience store, eyes on his phone, tracking his Uber. A police cruiser rolled up. 2 officers stepped out. One of them, Officer Blake Vaughn. Within minutes, Julian was on the ground, face against the concrete, cuffed. They said he matched a description. They said he was loitering. They said he was about to break in. They didn't ask questions, didn't wait for explanations. They saw him, his skin, his build, his presence, and decided right there, guilty. Grace slid into the seat beside Maya Brooks, the defense attorney. Maya didn't waste words. 20 years of courtroom battle had stripped her of the need to fill silence with niceties. She leaned over, voice low and crisp. "We have the Uber records. We have surveillance showing he never touched the door. We have statements from professors." She paused. Grace felt it. But Maya didn't sugarcoat. It may not be enough. Grace's heart thudded once, heavy but unsurprised, because she already knew the word of a young black man, no matter how clean his record, weighed less than the polished boots of a uniformed officer, especially that officer. Across the room, Officer Vaughn sat at the prosecution table, smug and settled, chatting easily with the assistant district attorney. He looked relaxed, like a man who'd done this before, like a man who knew the system would never question him. Grace watched him lean over, whisper something to the ADA, then chuckle under his breath. The same chuckle she'd heard that morning, the one that dismissed her entire existence without saying a word. She curled her fingers into fists beneath the table, then breathed. She wasn't here to get angry, she was here to get even. The judge entered. The court called to order. The room settled into that familiar, uneasy quiet, the kind of quiet that buzzes with expectation and danger. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the state calls Officer Blake Vaughn to the stand." Grace didn't blink. She sat still, spine straight, eyes focused. She already knew what was coming. She'd seen this dance before, heard it, lived it, and now she was going to watch it unfold all over again. Footsteps echoed as Vaughn took the stand. His uniform crisp, his badge gleaming, his face calm, professional, almost noble. He took the oath, sat down, folded his hands in his lap like he was posing for a portrait. And when he turned to the jury, his expression was perfectly composed. Not too proud, not too cold, just enough humility to make him seem trustworthy. "Officer Vaughn," the prosecutor began, "can you describe the night in question?" "Yes, sir," Vaughn said, voice steady and rehearsed. "My partner and I were patrolling the area when we observed the defendant loitering outside a closed business." Grace didn't move. He appeared erratic, pacing, fidgeting, glancing around, looked like he was preparing to break in. Every word fell like a slow, calculated drop of ink. Pacing, fidgeting, erratic, dog whistles. Grace had seen the script 1,000 times. It didn't shout, it suggested. It painted Julian not as a young man waiting for a ride, but as a threat, a shadow that didn't belong in the light. We approached and asked him what he was doing, Vaughn continued. He immediately became defensive, refused to cooperate, ignored commands. Grace closed her eyes for half a second. She remembered the night clearly. Julian wasn't defiant, he was terrified. Because when flashing lights hit your face at night, when your body fits the profile more than your resume ever will, there's nothing you can say that will change how they see you. And Vaughn, he knew it too. Given his behavior, Vaughn said, we detained him for further questioning. And just like that, with tone, with uniform, with practiced restraint, he turned a young man's future into a question mark. Grace glanced toward the jury. Some were focused, pens moving. Others shifted uncomfortably. She could feel it, the doubt, creeping in like fog. That's what a uniform does. It doesn't prove truth, it drapes it, even when it's lying. The room held its breath. Officer Vaughn sat tall in the witness chair, hands folded like he was posing for a recruitment poster. His testimony had landed exactly the way he intended. Carefully constructed, emotionless, dangerous. He wasn't just telling a story, he was building a case. Word by word, assumption by assumption, and it was working. Grace Whitmore could feel it. The way the jury leaned back, chewing on the narrative. The way the prosecutor let the silence linger, letting the illusion settle in, harden, take root. Then came the voice that broke it. Defense may proceed with cross-examination. And just like that, the courtroom shifted. Maya Brooks stood, not in a rush, not with fire, but with stillness. She straightened the sleeves of her blazer, adjusted her stance, and walked forward with the kind of quiet that said, I know exactly what I'm about to do. Her heels clicked once, twice. She didn't stand too close, not yet. She gave Vaughn space to feel comfortable, to believe he still held control. And then she began. Officer Vaughn, she said, her voice smooth as silk drawn across glass. You testified that my client appeared suspicious, pacing, fidgeting, looking around. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am, he replied. And that behavior, in your professional opinion, suggested criminal intent? Yes. She nodded once, then turned toward the court clerk. Your Honor, the defense would like to submit Exhibit A, surveillance footage from the convenience store's exterior camera, time-stamped, synced with Officer Vaughn's account. A murmur rustled through the room. Grace's heart tightened in her chest. This was it. The courtroom screen flickered to life. Grainy footage, wide angle, a quiet corner of Southeast D.C. at night. There was Julian standing exactly as he had described, phone in hand still, focused, waiting, not pacing, not fidgeting, not erratic, just waiting. Seconds passed, a car pulled up. Julian took one step forward, toward his Uber, nothing more. Maya let the footage play. She didn't speak. Let the silence speak for her. Let the jury see. Then she stepped forward again. Officer Vaughn, she said gently, where in this footage does my client commit a crime? Vaughn blinked, just once. It was subtle, but Grace caught it. A hesitation. The first crack. The footage doesn't capture everything, he said, his tone clipped. It's just one angle. Maya smiled, not cruel, not smug, just knowing. Which is why we have another. She turned to the clerk. Exhibit B, dashcam footage from the Uber driver. The screen changed again. Now, Julian from the driver's perspective. Still, calm, silent, until the car pulled up and he moved toward it. The room shifted. You could feel it. The weight tipping, the story slipping. Grace watched Vaughn. His posture didn't break, but his confidence did. You could see it in his throat tightening. his fingers flexing slightly. Maya stepped forward. "Would you like to revise your statement, Officer Vaughn?" His jaw locked. "I've been in law enforcement for 15 years. I know what a crime looks like." "Of course," Maya replied smoothly. "But that wasn't my question." She walked slowly, closing the space now. "Did you witness my client attempt to break into that store?" Vaughn paused, a second too long. "No." The word hit like steel, dropped in water. The jury sat still, absorbing, processing. Grace heard someone in the back draw a breath. And Maya, she didn't let up. "One last question, Officer Vaughn." She turned to face the jury. "Was my client arrested that night because of something he did, or because of something you felt?" Vaughn exhaled, slow. "We're trained to act on instinct." Maya nodded. Instinct. She let the word hang, then turned. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've seen the footage, you've seen the facts. So now I ask you, what carries more weight? Instinct or truth?" The courtroom stilled. What would you believe, a badge or the facts on tape? Vaughn sat rigid. His hands gripped the chair a little too tightly now. His badge hadn't protected him from the tape. His story hadn't survived the lens. And Grace? She sat silent, watching the man who tried to reduce her cousin's life to a suspicion squirm under the weight of his own undoing. But this wasn't over, not yet, because the system never falls in one blow. You have to keep hitting it until it breaks. And Grace Whitmore had just gotten started. The courtroom wasn't quiet, it was holding its breath. Officer Vaughn sat stiff in the witness chair, stripped of the shield that once wrapped his words in credibility. His confidence had taken a hit, but not the kind that leaves a bruise, the kind that leaves a crack. Grace Whitmore could feel it, so could the jury, and so could the prosecutor, who now stood, adjusting his tie like it had gotten too tight around the neck. "Miss Whitmore," he said, looking toward her with eyes that sharpened to a point, "you've spoken passionately in defense of the accused, but you're his cousin, correct?" Grace didn't flinch. "Yes." "Then why," he said, stepping forward, "should this jury believe your words over those of a decorated officer with 15 years of experience?" There it was. The oldest move in the book. Discredit the woman, call her emotional, tie her words to blood, not truth, and remind everyone exactly who you think deserves to be believed. A murmur passed through the gallery, small, fleeting, but enough. Enough to signal the doubt he wanted to sow. Grace inhaled slowly. She didn't rush, didn't protest, didn't even lift her chin. She simply reached into her satchel, deliberate, precise, like she was peeling back the layers of a performance that had gone on long enough. She pulled out a thin leather case, unsnapped it, then slid it onto the table, face up, a White House identification badge. The seal gleamed under the courtroom lights, not flashy, not loud, but undeniable. It said, "You were wrong about me, and now you answer to me." The shift in the room was seismic. You could feel the tension snap like a thread pulled too tight. Whispers swept through the benches. The jury froze. Even the judge leaned forward, eyebrows lifting just slightly. But Grace? Grace was watching one man, Blake Vaughn. For the first time since the trial began, his breath caught, his body tensed, and behind his eyes, recognition. He knew. He remembered the smirk in the hallway, the brush off at the front doors, the way he dismissed her without a second thought. And now, he saw the badge and he saw the mistake. Grace looked up, voice calm and steady. "Yes, I'm Julian's cousin, and I am also a senior advisor to the White House Office of Public Engagement." Silence, not because they didn't hear her, but because they did. "My job," she continued, "is to build trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. She turned toward the jury now. No notes, no podium, just her voice. So when I say the system is broken, I'm not just speaking as a family member. I'm speaking as a public servant who has sat in rooms where change is written. And I'm telling you, what you saw here today isn't a one-time mistake, it's a pattern. Her words didn't shout. They landed like stone on steel, like truth that refused to bend. Vaughn looked pale, not with guilt, not with shame, with fear, because in that moment he realized this wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning. And she wasn't just a cousin defending family. She was a woman with power, with memory, with reach. And now his badge, his story, his silence was under the eye of someone who couldn't be ignored. Grace didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply let the moment breathe. Let every person in that courtroom feel it. You thought you understood who she was, but you didn't know her at all. The prosecutor's confidence had evaporated. He shifted on his feet, suddenly unsure of where to stand. His tie, so carefully adjusted, now hung just a little too tight around his pride. And Officer Vaughn? His posture remained upright, but the look in his eyes, that was different. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the performance. Now he sat like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. And Grace Whitmore, she was holding it in her hands. She turned to the judge. Her voice remained even, respectful. But it carried weight now, a different kind. Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to present additional evidence relevant to Officer Vaughn's credibility. The judge looked at her with open interest now. Not surprise, not resistance. He nodded. Proceed, Ms. Whitmore. Grace reached into her satchel again, calm, measured, and this time pulled out a thick stack of printed documents bound in a rubber band. She held them up for the courtroom to see. These are official complaints filed against Officer Vaughn over the past 5 years. Allegations of wrongful detainment, racial profiling, use of excessive force, all targeted at young black men. A ripple passed through the gallery, not just sound, but energy, shift, realization. Some of these complaints were dismissed, others quietly settled. Most never saw trial. But together, she laid the stack on the table with a solid, undeniable thud. They tell a story. The prosecutor was already stepping forward. Objection, Your Honor, this is... The judge lifted a hand. Overruled, let her finish. Grace turned back to Vaughn. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't need it to. Do you remember Malcolm Hayes? His jaw tightened. No response. Or Jamal Edwards. Tyrone Bennett? Dion Lewis? Each name landed like a nail in the coffin. And every time, Vaughn didn't move. But his silence, it spoke. Grace looked at the jury. The same phrases appear in every report. Loitering, pacing, fidgeting. Looked like he didn't belong. How many times have we heard this same script used to justify injustice? She turned back to the judge. And that is exactly what Officer Vaughn claimed about my cousin. Vaughn's voice cut in, too sharp, too fast. That's outrageous. Grace turned her eyes back to him, calm, controlled. Is it? Because this isn't about one night. This is about a pattern, a practice script. One that's gone unchecked because people like you assume no one will connect the dots. The room was frozen now. Even the jury, their pens stilled, their eyes narrowed. And Vaughn, he didn't look at anyone, not Grace, not the judge, not even the prosecutor, because for the first time, he knew they were all looking back. Grace exhaled slowly. When you wear a badge, your word carries weight. That's a sacred responsibility. But Officer Vaughn abused it again and again. She turned to the judge. If this case hinges on his credibility, then Your Honor, the defense believes we've shown there's none left. A long pause, the kind that rearranges people. Then the judge looked at the prosecutor. Does the state have any further evidence connecting Mr. Davis to a crime? The prosecutor hesitated, glanced at Vaughn. Vaughn didn't return the look, and for the first time, the state had nothing left to say. In that case, the judge said, "This court finds insufficient evidence to proceed. The charges against Julian Davis are dismissed." The gavel came down, a single sound, sharp, final. But for Grace, that sound was more than just procedure. It was release, it was exhale, it was justice, finally cracking through. Behind her, someone sobbed. Julian's mother. Maya squeezed Julian's shoulder. He didn't move at first, didn't even blink. He was too stunned. Then, slowly, he breathed a full breath, the kind he hadn't taken in weeks. But Grace? She was looking at one man, Officer Vaughn. His hands were clenched, his face frozen. But his eyes? Terrified, because for the first time in his career, he was the one being watched. The parking garage was nearly empty. Echoes lingered longer here, each footstep ricocheting against damp concrete and flickering overhead lights. The kind of place that felt like silence had weight. The kind of place you noticed if someone was following you. And Grace Whitmore, she noticed. The moment she reached for her car door, she felt it. Not in sound, not in sight, but in instinct. The kind that had been passed down from her father and his father before him. The kind that tells you don't turn around too fast. That was quite the performance, Miss Whitmore. The voice didn't rise above a whisper, but it cut just the same. She turned slowly. Officer Blake Vaughn, still in uniform, still clinging to the image, but the edges had started to crack. His jaw was tight, his hands balled at his sides, and his eyes, dark, narrow, furious, but behind the fury, was fear. "I should have known someone like you had friends in high places." Grace didn't blink. "You should have known someone like me doesn't stop until justice is served." He took a step closer, too close. But Grace stood her ground. Her fingers gently touched her purse, where her phone was already recording, because this wasn't just another conversation. It was evidence. "You think you won," he sneered. "This system's protected me for 15 years. You really think some little courtroom stunt's gonna change that?" She tilted her head, her voice like smooth glass. "I don't think your luck just ran out, Blake. I know it." He let out a low, humorless chuckle, but it was empty. "That badge you wear, it won't protect you forever." His voice dropped lower, a warning disguised as a whisper. "People like me, we don't forget." Grace didn't flinch, didn't move. She just breathed. "Good, because people like me, we don't forgive." A long second passed. Then, footsteps, not hers, not his, measured, deliberate. From the far side of the garage, a figure emerged. Then another. Federal agents, plain clothes, badges out, no hesitation. And at the front of the group, Agent Marcus Langley, Internal Affairs. "Officer Vaughn," Langley called, voice crisp, "you are under federal investigation for falsifying reports, obstruction of justice, and systemic misconduct." Vaughn spun. "This is harassment." He stepped back, hands raised, not in surrender, but in defense, like a man who still believed he could talk his way out of anything. "Don't," Langley warned. Two agents moved in. "Put your hands where we can see them." Grace didn't move, didn't need to. She watched Vaughn stall, hesitate, try to calculate a way out. There wasn't one. The cuffs clicked around his wrists with a clean metallic finality. His breath hitched, and for the first time since the moment he had thrown Julian to the ground, he looked afraid, truly afraid. Grace stepped forward, not close, just enough. Their eyes met. "You thought the system would always protect you," she said softly, "that no one would ever call you on the damage you left behind." She let the silence speak for her. But justice doesn't forget. Vaughn didn't reply, because there was nothing left to say. As agents led him away, Grace stood still in the echoing quiet. Not triumphant, not smug, steady, because this wasn't about vengeance. This was about truth catching up to the lie. And this time, justice was the one watching. The podium bore the seal of the Department of Justice. Behind it, a sea of reporters, flashing cameras, activists, elders, community leaders, some holding signs, others holding stories. In front of it, Grace Whitmore, no judge, no jury, no defense table, just her voice, and the moment that had been years in the making. She stood tall, still, composed, but inside her chest, her father's voice whispered again, "One day you're going to do something important here." She took a slow breath, then spoke. For too long, justice has been a privilege, handed to those who could afford it, denied to those who simply asked for it. The murmurs stopped, the cameras clicked, but slower now. But justice is not a gift. It is not charity. It is a right. Each word carried weight, not because it was loud, but because it was true. Grace didn't preach, she didn't rally, she testified. This week made one thing clear: no badge, no uniform, no title places anyone above accountability. And if you wear power without responsibility, that's not law, that's violence. The wind picked up behind her, but she didn't blink. This wasn't just a trial, it was a mirror, and this country had to look at its own reflection. The verdict wasn't just about one young man, it was about all the names that never made it to court, all the mothers who never got an answer, all the voices buried under the silence of a system too afraid to change. She let the moment settle, no applause yet, no noise, just stillness. But change doesn't come with a headline, it comes with work, hard work, uncomfortable work, and it comes with people who are willing to say no more. Then applause, not polite, not performative, real, the kind that echoed down steps and into streets, the kind that meant, "We heard you." As Grace stepped down from the podium, the crowd parted, and there, waiting, was Julian. Eyes steadier now, shoulders a little taller. He grinned just a little. "You really pissed off some powerful people today." Grace exhaled. A soft, tired laugh escaped. "Good." They stood together at the base of the courthouse steps. The White House stood just beyond the skyline, not as a monument, but as a reminder, a responsibility. "What happens now?" Julian asked. Grace's eyes didn't leave the horizon. "Now," she said, voice unwavering, "now we keep going." Because justice didn't end with a verdict. It didn't end in a courtroom. And it sure as hell didn't end with an arrest. It began here, with a woman who refused to stay quiet, with a name they tried to ignore, with a promise she refused to break. And Grace Whitmore, she wasn't done yet. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Hit that like button. Comment below, what does justice mean to you? And subscribe to Black Women for more powerful, untold stories just like this. Because when we raise our voices, we raise the standard, together.